I'm Logan Crawford, and right now on Spotlight, we're exploring a powerful memoir. It is called Elephants, the Grass, and a Teacher by Dr. Chinyere Egbe. In this deeply personal account, the doctor shares the harrowing experiences he and his family endured during the Nigerian Civil War, offering a rare first-hand perspective on one of history's most devastating conflicts. Join us right now as we uncover his remarkable story of resilience and survival amidst unimaginable hardship. We're delighted to have this very talented author join us here today on Spotlight. We thank the team at Mainspring Books for helping us put him in the spotlight today, and we ask viewers like you to support authors like him by subscribing to our channel and by purchasing his amazing book. The links are below this interview. Doctor, welcome to our show. Thank you for being our guest today.
Thank you. I am honored to be here with you. Good morning.
Good morning. This is your own true story, and it's quite compelling. As we talked about right from the picture on the cover, it grabs you and pulls you in and makes you want to know more. Tell us about that picture and why you chose it for the cover.
Well, the picture, I chose it for the cover because my intention was to actually depict exactly what happened during that Civil War. I mean, it was carnage, and people suffered tremendously just to express themselves over a period of 2.5 years of agony and you say dangers.
Yeah, absolutely. It was a devastating conflict that raged for years. Let's talk about the title of your book, Elephants, the Grass, and a Teacher. It is also very compelling. Tell us the significance, if you would.
Well, the significance of elephants, the grass, and the teacher, which runs through the book in the sense that elephants refer to the political class, the aristocratic class in any society throughout history, in my viewpoint. And the grass are the masses of the people who actually end up suffering the most in any kind of war. My feeling is that, I mean, and I've read about wars throughout history, and it's the elites, the aristocracy, that precipitates war because they are not able to either resolve their differences or because they are greedy. And so they drag everybody into war. And in the end, the real victims of war are the masses or the people who end up, they die the most. I mean, ask yourself a good question. How many lieutenant colonels, how many battalion commanders, what percentage of battalion commanders die in a war? What percentage of ordinary foot soldiers die in a war? I mean, they are the cannon for them. And so the teacher here refers to my dad, who was an agricultural scientist, a London-trained, University of London-trained educator. But he had foresight and he developed this plantation. We had poultry, so we were able to eat. But besides that, a lot of times we ran into danger. Just his name alone, because he was a famous educationist, just his name alone, so in his presence or even his absence, we were shielded from the dangers of the war as we faced several, I would say, close calls with annihilation. The family could have been practically wiped out, if not in practically all the instances, just his personal influence, whether he was there or not.
Exactly. A father is so important in a household during any time, but particularly during war times when, sheer survival or mere survival depends upon him. Let's talk a little bit about Biafra and why the push for independence and liberation failed so badly or miserably, and how much support did the Biafra people give to the leadership at the time, and why wasn't it sufficient to help?
Well, the war was precipitated as a result of, again, the politicians not being able to conduct something as simple as election. As soon as the British gave us independence, we began to have election problems. So the only peaceful election in Nigeria that was ever held was in 1958-59. And so when we began to do our own elections from 1962 on, we just went into crisis, and there was violence. And in the end, there was a military coup in January 1966. Now, this military coup was botched. It was distorted. Either both in its execution and the interpretation that people gave it. And so there were attempts to make peace, to resolve issues, and those issues were not resolved, which eventually led to ethnic cleansing of Eastern Nigerians in different parts of Nigeria. Understandably, the January coup did lead to riots, and then there was a counter coup in July of 1966. So the crisis eventually just became unmanageable. The ethnic cleansing essentially, drove Eastern Nigerians out of every part of Nigeria, almost every part of Nigeria. And because the leaders were not able to sincerely among themselves, honestly among themselves, resolve the issues that arose, the Eastern Nigerian region seceded from Nigeria and declared itself to be an independent republic. Now, the Nigerian government did not accept this and tried to get the Eastern Nigerian leader, Lieutenant Colonel Ojukwu, to sort of renounce the secession, and he wouldn't. And so the Nigerian government declared war in July 1966.
Yeah. Talk a little bit about your father. He escaped from Nigerian occupied territory. Tell us about this aspect of the story. It's a critical part of the story, as I understand it.
It's a critical part of the story. Now, war was declared in July 1966. And I would say the Biafran side was ill prepared for war. My critique throughout the book is that their understanding of war and how to fight a war was, to say the least, naive, I would say pedestrian. And so what happened was that Biafra just progressively lost territory and subjecting people to a lot of suffering. And because the Eastern Nigerians, especially the Igbos of Eastern Nigeria, were frightened about what would happen, streams of refugees flowed into the other parts of Nigeria because the people were determined and people were frightened. That is one thing. First, they were frightened about what Nigeria would do to them. And so my hometown is about 70 miles, more than 70 miles, about 100 miles from the northern border from which the Nigerians were coming in. So in May 1960, at the end of March of 1969, the Nigerian army eventually captured my hometown, entered my hometown. My father being a prominent person, he wasn't comfortable staying. And because, again, of the determination of the people to really succeed in this secession effort, my father worked with a contingent of the Biafran army, and they shot open a perimeter, a corridor, where the Nigerian soldiers were occupying a certain part of our hometown. They shot their way through and escaped. And the entire battalion plus a detachment of a brigade that was there with that battalion escaped after a firefight. And so that's what happened.
Your father pushed for you to escape as well. Tell us about how you escaped and what challenges you encountered trying to get out of the country.
Yes, after my father escaped, I don't know how, but I was eventually told 40 years later by my sisters that it was somebody from my hometown that went and told the Nigerian army stationed in my hometown that it was my father that led the escape. I wouldn't say he led it because he was not a soldier. He was 50 years at that time, so he could not have led it. The story of that escape is published in Google by somebody 50 years later. So when he escaped, and they said somebody went and, tattled, saying he was the one that led it. No, he simply joined. He simply walked with the battalion. An honor guard was held for him. He knew the jungles. He knew jungles very well. So he knew at what point they could escape. That I can tell you. In any event, they then came and arrested the whole family. My mother, all my brothers and sisters, and anybody who happened to be in the family compound at the village at that time, and threatened to shoot all of them. As a matter of fact, my mother was already tied up to be shot. My uncle, my father's immediate younger brother, was already tied up to be shot. But then there was my 2-year-old baby brother and everybody in between. My mother had 9 of us. And, and so what happened, what saved them, was that the commander, the area commander of the Nigerian army who sent for them to be arrested, was somebody that my father had taught in school when he was in 7th grade. And so he asked my mother, "What are you doing here?" Say, "Your soldiers arrested me." "So where is your husband?" My mother lied and said, "I've not seen my husband in 3 years since the ethnic cleansing crisis in northern Nigeria." Either out of credulity or for convenience, the commander accepted the story. And so he admonished that if anybody ever goes and bothers this family again, the person will be shot. Besides that, there was a picture, a family picture, not really a family picture, it was a picture that my father had taken with this commander when he was their scoutmaster 20 years earlier. And in that picture also was the commander of one of the divisions of the Nigerian army, the name of Brigadier Adekunle. And he was their teacher. He was the teacher of some of the leaders of Nigeria. And so the commander said, "No, you have to release them." And so they all came home. But then I escaped narrowly because I was running an errand and I saw a mango at the top of a tree. So I was climbing that mango tree. I was a teenager. So climbing trees for mangoes was not unusual.
Yeah.
And so that delayed me for about 15 minutes. Otherwise, I would be in the house when they came. But
Amazing.
my father then kind of felt like that he was very uncomfortable about it. So he sent 3 men, the children of one of his best friends in town. So they came and retrieved me. We went to a jungle hideout, stayed there for a whole night. Then the next night began to rain. And so we meandered through the forest for about 10 hours under a heavy tropical downpour. And when we thought it was over, we were captured, tortured, and imprisoned in a dugout prison underground. And after being tortured, again, the village came, many people in the village came and said, hey, no. This is the son of the agricultural scientist. Don't you touch him. So after 10 hours imprisonment, they came and released us. And so that was what happened.
Amazing, amazing. Harrowing stories, no doubt. Where were you at the end of the war, and how did the war end for you?
Well, at the end of the war, like I said, we were just in a losing army. I was in the Biafran Organization of Freedom Fighters in a region. And about the end of November, the Nigerian army began to make its final push. And so we were under heavy shell fire. And we were on the run for the next 10 days from about December 24 till about January 12. And we went to different locations to reorganize. And by the time we stayed there for 3 days, the shell fire will come again. And so on the 12th of January, 1970, while again we were now in total disarray, I was totally cut off from my unit. I could not see anybody. So I came to a certain point where I saw about 100 soldiers from my hometown, including 2 of my immediate cousins. And so I stopped there, and we had said, enough is enough. Whoever wants to fight this war, let them go ahead and fight it. We're going to shoot open a corridor for ourselves. And because our hometown was close by, we'll shoot open a corridor. We will simply get into our hometown area, drop our guns, and whoever wants to keep fighting can go ahead and fight. And that was around 12 noon of that day. And so I fell asleep. And about 3 p.m., 4 p.m., when I woke up from my sleep, somebody said an announcement had been made that the war was over. I dropped my gun, and the next morning, I walked 25 miles back home.
Amazing, amazing. It's an amazing story, a story of survival, a story of resilience, a story of determination. The name of the book is Elephants, the Grass, and a Teacher. It is Dr. Egbe's true life story. It is a deeply personal account. And in the book, the doctor shares the harrowing experiences he and his family endured during the Nigerian Civil War. You heard some of his story today. There is much more detail in the book, and this book is highly recommended. Doctor, thank you so much for joining me here today on Spotlight.
Thank you so much. It's my pleasure. I look forward to future writings about the war, and I'm so glad that I was able to speak with you today. Have a nice day.
Well, I appreciate your time, and I think it's so important that you do continue writing about your experience because it informs people about a chapter of world history that many people know little or nothing about. So this book is a great service to society, no doubt. To the folks at home, I'm Logan Crawford, thanking you for your time this time until next time on Spotlight.